Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Salim Akhtar Malik, your host at the Observation Post channel. On this channel, I discuss issues of national and international importance, military history, military technology, as well as national security and defense. You can interact with me on this channel by giving your views, which I hold very important to me, because your views and comments help me in fine-tuning my talks, which I deliver to you from time to time on this channel. You can also interact with me on this channel as well as on Twitter, where my address is @SalimAkhtar53. In this session, I'll be talking to you about why Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates are interested in brokering a deal between India and Pakistan, a peace deal on Jammu and Kashmir, which will be in favor of India, which will protect India's interests and its policy on Kashmir. So in my previous talks, I had talked to you about how Prime Minister Modi on August 5, 2019 abrogated Articles 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution, which, though cosmetically, had accorded a semblance of some autonomy to the people of Indian-held Kashmir. Thereafter, he trifurcated the state into three union territories. Now, a union territory is a territory which is ruled directly from the center, that is from New Delhi in India's case. So thereafter, there was a long lockdown and a curfew in the state. Hundreds of thousands of people were arrested, and there were attempts at changing the demography of the state by issuing citizenship to hundreds of thousands of Indians living in other states of the Indian Union. So this lockdown continued for more than, it is still in practice, and it is now 2.5 years since it was imposed, and the Indian government in June called a meeting of the pliant Kashmiri leaders, that is those Kashmiri leaders which are already in the pocket of the government of India, to ascertain as to what should be done in the future. And reportedly, they are now contemplating on redrawing the electoral constituencies in Jammu and Kashmir in order to achieve an artificial Hindu majority in the now defunct Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir state. Thereafter, they plan to restore a truncated Jammu and Kashmir state, less Ladakh region. So Ladakh would not be included in that region, only the Hindu-dominated Jammu region as well as the Muslim Kashmir Valley. So the redrawing of the constituencies is being done in order to gain an artificial Hindu majority in the Legislative Assembly. Thereafter, hold fraudulent elections in the states and elect a Hindu chief minister. So for the first time, there will be a Hindu chief minister who would then request the Indian government to abrogate Article 370, which is a constitutional requirement because the action of August 5, 2019 does not fulfill this requirement. And Indian allies, particularly the United States, are advising India to go to the legislative to seek abrogation of Article 370 through the Legislative Assembly, that is the puppet Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir, that is Indian held Jammu and Kashmir. What I had missed in my previous talk was how Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates are interested in brokering a deal between India and Pakistan, a deal which will be a peace deal by pressurizing Pakistan to accept the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir as the international boundary between India and Pakistan. And according to the Indian calculations, this would end the chapter or close the chapter of Jammu and Kashmir dispute between India and Pakistan forever. And this is why, this is what Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, prompted by the United States, are also advising Pakistan. And they say that after this peace deal which they are trying to broker between India and Pakistan, both these countries, that is the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, will then invest around $100 billion in the Kashmir region on development projects and in various commercial ventures. So we can understand why Saudi Arabia is interested. It is a country which is larger than United Arab Emirates, larger in size as well as in population, and under its crown prince Salman has grand ambitions to expand its geostrategic reach. But why United Arab Emirates, which is a small, rather a tiny state, though it is oil rich, why it is trying to punch above its height? It has even sent a space probe towards Mars. So we can understand this by going to the by exploring the history of this region till after the Camp David Accord between Egypt and Israel. The world did not take these Arab monarchies very seriously. And till then, till the signing of the Camp David Accord between Egypt and Israel, Egypt was the hub of Arab nationalism as well as the center of gravity of the Arab Middle East. It was the center of the Arab consciousness also. Between 1950s till 1967, Egypt was ruled by Jamal Abdel Nasser, who was a towering personality, and it was only after Egypt's defeat at the hands of Israel during the 1967 war, when Egypt gradually lost its clout in the Arab world, and the Arab monarchies, that is the monarchies in the Gulf region, then slowly replaced Egypt. And now these monarchies, these Gulf monarchies, are the new center of gravity of the Arab Middle East. To understand why these Arab states, that is the states in the Gulf region, are so important and are playing such a dominating, rather domineering role in the Arab Middle East, not only in the Arab Middle East, but also trying to influence the geopolitics as far away as South Asia. For that, we'll have to understand a term, China's string of pearls. This term, China's string of pearls, has been devised and is being used by the United States and its allies, which now include India also, to refer to a network of Chinese commercial as well as military bases and outposts strung between the Chinese coast and stretching as far away as Port Sudan in the Red Sea region. Now, these include Chinese economic ventures as well as military bases, and probably China has created this string of pearls in response to a similar network of American outposts which the United States has evolved and established globally after the Second World War. So this we would say American string of pearls stretches from Diego Garcia, the island of Diego Garcia, in the vicinity of Mauritius, and it then extends all the way up to Singapore, South Korea, as well as the other ASEAN regions, ASEAN countries which are friendly to the United States, and then it ends up in the Gulf. And Saudi Arabia, as well as the Gulf states of United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain, etc., are the westernmost cluster of this American equivalent to the Chinese string of pearls. Now, these states, these Gulf states, though many of these, except Saudi Arabia, are very small, these are just city states, these are very important to the American global interests in this region, and particularly the United Arab Emirates, which America calls it its closest ally in the region after Israel. So these, as I said, these countries or these city-states, they serve the American global interests. And these are there because the Americans, these states fulfill American interests. And as we know that American policy towards other states, except for Israel and its NATO allies, is based on transactional alliances. So the relationships are transactional, and its relationship with these Gulf states are also transactional. These will last till these states, they fulfill the American interests, and when they outlive their utility, America will not hesitate or bother to abandon them. And we can cite the example of Iran, where once the Shah of Iran was considered as the American policeman or America's policeman in the Gulf region. But then, when he outlived his utility, he was abandoned. Likewise, these states. And now, since Iran is hostile to the American interests and it has threatened many times to block the Strait of Hormuz, through which the oil pass and is transported towards the United States and Western Europe. The United Arab Emirates has now established oil pipelines which bypass the Strait of Hormuz, and this it has done in order to support the American interests in the region. So this brings us to the Tamil tea workers. I'll discuss about them. I'll discuss about them with you. I'll just give you a short background and will tell you why the Tamil tea workers in Sri Lanka are, the example is related to the situation in the Gulf. So these Tamil tea workers, which belong to the South Indian state of present Tamil Nadu in the Indian Union, were transported or exported to Sri Lanka, which was also under the British rule during the 18th and 19th centuries. They were transported to Sri Lanka to work on the British tea states. They were tea workers and they settled there and performed their duties, and they continued to work there even after India became independent, and also Sri Lanka, which was then called Ceylon. Then in 1960, they demanded to be given Sri Lankan citizenship. Till that time, they had Indian citizenship. So, as a result of the Indian pressure, they were given 40% of them were given Indian citizenship, whereas rest of them were denied citizenship. So in 1980s, India sponsored a mass uprising or a Tamil insurgency in the island state of Sri Lanka, which lasted for more than a decade, and it was defeated by the Sri Lankan army only in 2009. So the same can happen in the Gulf states, which as I've said, these are very fragile states, and most of these, or rather all of these states have sparse local populations. There are more than 3 crore expatriates from all over the world working in these countries. Out of these 3 crore expatriates, almost 60% are from South Asia. And out of those 60% expatriates from South Asia, half of them are from India, 11% from Bangladesh, less than 10% from Pakistan, and the rest are from other countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Afghanistan, Bhutan, etc. So this is the composition, this is the composition of the population in these regions, and there is a likelihood that after some time, say after 50 years, the expatriate populations, goaded by the Americans and her allies, demand citizenship of these Gulf states. And there might be a mass uprising in these states, resulting in the toppling of the Arab regimes and replacing the Arab regimes or the Arab monarchies with governments predominantly populated or administered by the expatriates, that is, most likely by the Indians. You see, even now, there is an Indian vice president of the United States of America. So why there could not be an Indian chief of an Indian chief, a chief executive of Indian origin in any one of these Gulf states after, say, 50 years from now. So this can happen. And the Arab monarchs know that they are on slippery ground, and they are now working on the contingency as to what would they do in case their power in the Gulf states is vanquished and they have to then leave. So for that purpose, they are investing all over the world, and they are also planning to invest in, they have already invested in massively in India, and they are planning to invest in Jammu and Kashmir in case Pakistan agrees to accept the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir as the permanent border between India and Pakistan. So this investment, as well as the other investments which they have done in rest of the world, particularly in the United States, in European Union countries, Switzerland, etc., and in the tax havens all around the world, they are doing it for the rainy days. And this is some sort of an insurance for those days when they will no longer be in power. This is what I wanted to say in this session. See you in the next video with a new topic. Till then, bye-bye.